Today is July 9th edition of Back Roads of Illinois. We were Central Illinois agriculture source and in the Midwest alongside in Central Illinois agriculture. We were glad you're here. Hurricane, the world agricultural supply and demand, crop conditions. Hurricane barely hitting on the Gulf Coast. The hurricane was hitting on the Gulf Coast and in Texas. It's impacting to the agricultural sector in southern Texas. Unfortunately, reported that there were 4 deaths by the hurricane in Texas. However, the storm is moving up in the Midwest like in Missouri and Illinois, Indiana, Michigan. The World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimate report is coming out for this Friday morning at 11 Central Time from the Department of Agriculture. This report is coming after the acreage report on June 28th from the Department of Agriculture. Crop conditions progress is up for the Midwest and Central Illinois. Otherwise, the weather models indicate more rain in the Midwest alongside in the Mississippi River Delta near Minnesota. Okay, we were talking about the wheat harvest in Minnesota and in Dakotas with Ed Usset from the University of Minnesota. We were going to talk about 45Z models with Kelly Nieuwhouse from Northwest Iowa, and we were talking about the commodities markets with Mike Zazzolo from Global Commodities in Atchison, Kansas, on Back Roads of Illinois. Please don't change the channel. Today, we were joining with Ed Usset from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great, Caesar. Thanks again for having me on.
Let's start with our conversation about the wheat yields in the upper Midwest and Dakotas.
Well,
could you give us an update on the wheat harvest in Minnesota and in Dakotas?
I can't do that yet, Caesar, because we are growers up here in the northern plains of spring wheat, and spring wheats have a later harvest. They're planted in the spring. And we can expect harvest to begin maybe as early as the first week of August, but really you get into mid-August. That's the gut slot of harvest. I can say, though, that the wheat crop, if you look at the crop conditions report for North Dakota in particular, and I'll focus on North Dakota just because it's a much bigger wheat producing state than we are in Minnesota. We're in the top 10, but North Dakota's number 1 or 2 every year. And North Dakota conditions look very good, running in line with some of the better yielding years. So I think things look all good in North Dakota and in Minnesota. I think we're going to have big yields. Caesar, yes, you were muted.
How about the winter wheat and hard red wheat?
Well, the winter wheat harvest has been progressing well. In fact, it's done, but essentially done in Oklahoma and Texas, a couple of big producing states, essentially done in Kansas for that matter. And their crops are, they're not record crops in terms of yields, but they're good. They're solid, much better than a year ago. And we've seen that harvest pressure work on wheat prices over the last 6 weeks. It's been pretty breathtaking to see the drop in wheat prices since mid to late May.
How is the weather conditions in South Dakota and southern Minnesota?
It has been a very wet spring for us. I note that in the months of May and June, there are areas in southern Minnesota reporting upwards of 25 inches in those 2 months. Maybe that includes April too. And of course, that's basically what we would expect in a normal year, 25 to 28 inches of rain, and here we got it in 3 months. So we got too much rain, and I noted yesterday's crop conditions report showed the entire Corn Belt with conditions better than a year ago, the core of the Corn Belt, if you will, except for Minnesota. Our conditions are a little worse than a year ago, and it's because of the too much rain. We do have some fantastic looking fields out there, a few of them, but we also have a lot of drowned out areas, and that's true in eastern South Dakota too.
Can you tell our listeners about the corn and beans with this weather conditions for right now?
Well, as I said, if you want to look at the entirety of the Corn Belt, things look pretty good. If you look at the nation as a whole, but I've got a very Minnesota backyarditis mindset going right now. Our crop conditions have been getting worse over the last few weeks. They're certainly not terrible, but as I said, our crop conditions are worse today than they were a year ago here in Minnesota for corn and soybeans, and that's contrary to the rest of the Corn Belt. Excuse me.
Ed, what is your sources for Russian wheat and Ukraine?
Well, Caesar, I have no inside sources there. I'm reading the same public pronouncements and publications that you're reading and your audience is reading. I do know that concerns about the Russian wheat crop this year appear to be real. And the ongoing war, of course, is an ongoing issue there. But this is very important issue right now because Russia has stepped into the breach over the last couple of years, being they're the primary wheat exporting country in the world. And they have stepped in and made sure that the flow of wheat has continued to poor countries in Africa, poor countries in Southeast Asia. But if they have a smaller crop, they're going to have a difficult time meeting all those needs. So the wheat market, that's what drove its rally in April and May. And unfortunately, it appears to me that without fresh news and a winter wheat harvest coming in, we've forced prices back down.
What about the shipment?
I'm not sure I'm up to date on any particular problems today, Caesar. I'm not up to date on particular problems today. The grain continues to move despite the bad news out of the Black Sea region.
Is there anything would you like to go to tell our audience about the wheat markets?
Well, the wheat markets are a tale of, there are two stories going on. One is this international story and the problems in Russia. And if you take a world view of wheat stocks and carryouts worldwide, the wheat market should be very interesting. Ending stocks relative to use, if you take China out of the picture, are very low. Might be among the lowest percentage I've seen in 60 plus years. So that's interesting. But here in the US, our exports last year were at their lowest level in 50 years. Our food use, our consumption of wheat flour products has basically been stagnant for 25 years. Total food use of wheat has been stagnant for 25 years, despite the fact that our population is 25% bigger in 25 years. So if you take a very US focus on the wheat market, it's not good. If you take a worldwide, if you can step back and take a world view of the wheat market, it should be good.
What is the acreage report on the wheat?
Wheat acreage, we're total wheat acreage, 47 million acres roughly in this year, 2024. Just to give you some perspective as to how much wheat has given way to corn and soybean. Back in 1981, the year I started in the grain business professionally, the U.S. Planted a record 88 million acres of wheat in 1981. Fast forward 43 years, 47 million acres of wheat. We've lost 41 million acres of wheat, and we've lost them to soybeans and corn.
Do you have any final thoughts on the wheat harvest season?
Well, spring wheat, as I say, is still a month away before starting. But the crops, as we speak today, Caesar, the crops in the northern plains, I'm talking about North Dakota, Northwest Minnesota, South Dakota, Montana is a big wheat producing state. Things look good. And I'm expecting, this is fingers crossed here, Caesar. You don't want to get ahead of yourself. But if the weather holds up, we don't have any too much rain or too much heat. If we have a normal development from here on out, I expect very good yields out of the northern plains. Probably some lower protein wheat too. That usually comes with good yields.
Thanks, Ed.
Thank you.
This is Ed Usset from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities on back roads of Illinois. We were coming back with Kelly Nieuwhouse from Northwest Iowa. Today, we were joining with Kelly Nieuwhouse from Northwest Iowa and Sioux City area. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Caesar, I'm doing well. Thank you.
Let's start with our conversation about the weather in Iowa and Sioux City area.
Yeah, Caesar, we've had an excessive rainfall event during this spring planting season. We've received our normal annual rainfall amounts of 30 plus inches since April 15th up to today. So as you can think or see, we have had a lot of flooding issues, a lot of planting issues. We're still working on spraying soybean post herbicides today. We've got a few days of that left, and that's not normal for the 9th of July. So we've got some weather issues. We've got some crop damages. We've got drowned out spots that are zero that have been replanted twice, and they're still drowned out spots. We've got fringe areas around that are excessively wet. So like the corn's kind of yellow. And so the fields are uneven. So we've got a different situation than we've had the last 2 years when we've had excessively dry weather. So it definitely did a complete flip from too dry to too wet in a 12-month period.
How is the soybean?
The soybeans are about the same as the corn. It took us approximately 2 months to plant our corn and soybeans. We started April 13th planting corn, finished May 15th, and then we started planting soybeans May 15th and finished on June 13th. So our corn and beans are pretty similar. They're uneven. We've got drowned out spots, and we're a few weeks behind normal. So we're going to need a long growing season. We definitely won't need an early frost this year to get this crop to maturity.
Can you tell our listeners about the weather with heavy rain in Iowa, South Dakota?
Yeah, this heavy rain events have kind of covered northwest Iowa, north central Iowa, southwest Minnesota, and southeast South Dakota. And like I said earlier, we've had some farms since April 15th that have received 30 plus inches of rainfall. The last one that was the worst one was a 6-inch event about 10 days ago on an early Saturday morning. And that created a lot of flash flooding. And those floodwaters then quickly went down to Sioux City, Iowa, where the river crested there 17 hours sooner than they expected and 2 feet above what they expected. And as you know, that water from Sioux City goes to Omaha, and from there it goes to the Mississippi River to St. Louis. So it's created quite an issue all the way up and down the major river tributaries in the U.S.
What is the river level in the Missouri River?
I really can't tell you exactly what that is right now. I know it didn't break the levees down by Omaha. I've got a good friend that keeps an eye on that, and the levees down there held. So that was a good thing. If they would have burst, it would have been a lot worse flooding. But they still had a lot of river bottom flooding and stuff. But I can't tell you right offhand what the river levels were.
How is the corn crop in northwest Iowa?
Well, it's really variable. We've got some good looking corn. We've got a lot of drowned out spots. We've got a lot of yellow corn. A lot of fields are uneven, and so that's going to make it a challenge for not only harvesting, but here we're thinking about fungicide treatments, and we usually like to have the field at least pollinating or pollinated, brown silked. And we'll have parts of the fields that'll be brown silked, and we'll have parts of the field that haven't tasseled yet. So it's going to be a challenge. So far, I haven't seen a lot of leaf disease pressure yet, but we're concerned with all the moisture that they will become an issue. So on the fields that are decent, we're going to treat with a fungicide treatment here, hopefully within the next 2 weeks.
Do you have any friends? Do you have any friends in southern Minnesota? They have a problem with the fields.
Yeah, I've got several friends up in southwest Minnesota, and they've sent me a lot of pictures that look a lot like our area. A lot of ponding, a lot of flooded out areas. So yeah, it covers a pretty large area. So it's affecting a large part of the corn belt, and it's a high producing part of the corn belt. So time will tell. We probably won't know the real yield damages until the combines roll, but it is covering a pretty large area here in the upper Midwest.
Kelly, farmers are interested in the 45Z models in the IR bill from Congress. How do farmers could have more effective in the model?
Yeah, there is a lot of discussions going on right now about the 45Z tax credits down to the farmer level. There's a IRA bill has been passed. It is a law, and there is stipulations in there. There's quite a few different tax credits. There's the 40B, the 45Q, and the 45Z. And the 45Z has an opportunity for farmers to receive tax credits for low carbon or climate friendly corn production. And there's a lot of discussions. There's nothing's fine tuned to the point where it's going to happen for sure. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen before it's a sure thing. But the discussion is the main thing not to allow it, the tax or treasury department to base your credits on farming practices or bundling of farming practices like they did with the 40B tax credit. They bundled the no-till and the cover crops and the enhanced nitrogen usage to qualify. And apparently there's only about 1% of the farmers that would qualify for that tax credit. The 45Z, if it's based off of the GREET model feedstock calculator, there's a lot of farmers that would qualify already, and including myself. I've got some CI scores determined on some of my farms. And according to the GREET model, the average corn producer, it has a CI score of 29.1. If you reduce that by 10 points, if you're under 19, you could start qualifying for a tax credit. The farms I've done with regular commercial nitrogen fertilizer range from 9 to 12, my CI scores. And the farms I have manure applied, I have a negative CI score. And so we're hoping with the 45Z, but like I said, there's going to be a lot of discussion before this is finalized, that this climate-friendly farming practices is based more off your carbon intensity scores field by field than by bundling or forcing certain farming practices upon farmers in areas that they don't work. So there's going to be a lot of discussion, and don't know where it's going, but I recommend farmers to at least kind of checking into seeing where they sit, because there's a lot of good farming practices out there that would qualify.
What is your thoughts about it in 45Z models by the IRA bill?
Well, I think it's something that is futuristic. I think it's important that farmers determine where their carbon intensity scores are. And, the biofuels industry is going to benefit greatly from this. And when the biofuels industry benefits and the corn grind increases, corn prices improve. So, we're hoping that we can get this thing figured out and move forward and help the biofuels industry grow through potential with like clear flame engines, even small engine transportation, year-round E15. The Next Generation Fuels Act is a bill that NCGA is working hard on. That would benefit from these carbon tax credits and also sustainable aviation fuel. So that's the huge potential right there. If we can lower our CI scores low enough to qualify for that. And to be honest with you, I don't think that can happen through farming practices alone. The best benefit or the biggest option we have for sustainable aviation fuel is to get our carbon capture and sequestration pipelines done. Those pipelines would benefit a lot of ethanol plants in Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota, which is a large majority of where the ethanol is produced, and lowering their CI scores just by having the pipeline attached to them and capturing their CO2 and lowering their CI scores by 30 points would benefit a lot of those plants or have them qualify for sustainable aviation fuel.
Yes, sir, for sure. How the ethanol plants can be qualified for the 45Z models?
Well, that's already kind of put into place. If a ethanol plant or biofuels plant has a CI score under 50, they qualify. For every point under 50 CI score, there's a 2 cent per gallon tax credit. And so, if you're looking at a plant today that's at 65, we get the carbon capture and sequestration pipeline done, they'd be at 35. So you're looking at a 15-point reduction under the 50-point qualifying area. And that would equal about 30 cents per gallon benefit to the ethanol industry. And, that's security, or that certainty in the ethanol industry would help the ethanol industry expand. And whenever the ethanol industry has an opportunity to expand, that helps with corn grind. That helps us end our ending stocks, and that helps our prices at the farm level to increase. So there's a lot of work to be done, but we're hoping we can make this get this projects done and move forward.
How is the price for right now with ethanol production?
Well, I haven't really paid a lot of attention to ethanol prices here recently. I know corn prices are drastically low. We're looking at about $4.10 cash prices right now, and that's pretty low and pretty poor for the farmers at this point. So that's why we focus a lot on growing demand for what we produce, because anytime we can find a new use or grow demand through biofuels, we can help our prices to the farmers. So that's where the focus will be on with the corn growers. We'll be focused on at biofuels demand growth and also new uses through biofuels, and all those work together. It's kind of like a rising tide raises all ships. If we get the biofuels industry growing and get into the markets like sustainable aviation fuel, clear flame engines, increase the numbers through small engines like year-round E15 and the Next Generation Fuels Act, I've already heard ethanol plants would expand, and that would create more corn grind. It would create more feed distillers for livestock industry. That would be a low carbon feed source. And so that would all benefit the farmers by rising the prices and lowering the ending stocks.
Is there anything would you like to go to be telling our audience about this weather conditions and the 45Z?
Well, there's not really a lot of correlation between those two, but the weather conditions, we've been through this before. This is my 41st year of farming, and I've had six years where I've had excessive moisture. And I can tell you from experience, whenever I have excessive moisture in my area, I have crop losses. And so I'm pretty sure we're going to have a reduction in yield in our area. But it's a big country, and looking out your back door doesn't tell you the whole story. So after the combines get rolling, we'll start hearing numbers, and then we'll kind of know where we're at. So hopefully we can stabilize here and reduce the amount of rainfall, and let the plants recover.
For sure. Do you want to be re-edited on our conversation today?
Yes, that'd be great. Enjoyed the opportunity to visit with you.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Caesar. Have a good day.
This is Kelly Nieuwhouse from Northwest Iowa on back roads of Illinois. Welcome back with us on Back Roads of Illinois. We were joining with Josh Linville from StoneX and Fertilizer, a division out of Kansas City. Welcome to the show. How are you, Josh?
Doing well. Just trying to enjoy the summer while it's here. Pretty nice conditions here north of Kansas City. It's been almost a garden state. We're getting just enough heat units to challenge the crop. Plenty of rain, keeping everything going. So we're just crossing our fingers. No whammies. No white combines to come through. Otherwise, it's gorgeous out here. It's been a good year so far.
Let's start with our conversation about the fertilizer prices for right now alongside the weather and the wars.
Yeah, so we're
Can you
finally
tell our listeners about these prices?
absolutely. So we're finally starting to see most of the kind of the summer fill programs, the fall prepay programs that have been coming out. And some of these are relatively fresh. I can tell you just here within the last few hours, fall prepay anhydrous values have come out. Now, this is going to be more of a Western Corn Belt situation, but those prices have come out. Little proud, a little on the high side. So that's going to be interesting to see how that's taken. We're dealing with phosphate pricing, which is extremely high in relation to grain prices, yet the markets are so tightly supplied right now that frankly suppliers don't care. They're basically saying if you don't want it, somebody else will. Really, when it comes down to it, potash is about the only input right now from a fertilizer standpoint that feels well priced. And that's due to the fact that, when we continue to look at the world of potash, it's the only fertilizer that looks like it is kind of towing that line between well supplied and almost oversupplied. There's a lot of production that's coming online, some debottlenecks, some increases in production. All of these things have created a situation where there's a lot more out there than there had been. So everything else has kind of been volatile. We've seen prices higher, potash low, steady, stay as she goes.
How about P and K prices?
So the potash pricing very attractive, in my opinion. Now, could it be lower? Absolutely. Especially from the farm gate, you always want it cheaper. I know I've made that mistake, Easter and Thanksgiving and Fourth of July here recently, all my family farms. And if I make a statement of like, "Hey, this fertilizer is well priced," well, it's too high. It's always too high. That's always a feedback on that side of it. But potash is doing well. Phosphate is extremely high, and I truly feel farmers across the U.S. are going to feel that pain when they start to walk into the retail and they start to look at those inputs for their fall application season. We do a deal where we look at the basically we're trying to figure out how many bushels in this scenario of corn does it take to pay for a ton of DAP or a ton of MAP. And because from our standpoint, farming is it's about inputs and outputs. And right now, when you look at that ratio and you look at it versus all the weekly data points going all the way back to 2018, it's some of the worst that we have seen. It's not the absolute worst. You have to go back to 2008 for that. But Caesar, it's very, very high. They are values that I think farmers are going to look at and ask themselves a very hard question of, do I need this product this fall? Can I wait until spring? Can I cut back without hurting my overall yield? I think that phosphate demand has got an uphill road to go, but again, overall, it's one of those things that's even globally, it's still supported. China is typically your world's largest producer and exporter, and they've scaled off significantly from exports in June and July. India is in the hopper right now to step in and start buying a lot of tons. So, unfortunately, even though the prices don't seem to make sense globally, not only do they make sense, they're kind of supported today, which is a scary statement to make.
Do you see increasing the prices for inflation, especially right now with the weather?
unfortunately, it sure seems like grain prices are decreasing. It doesn't seem to care about inflation, right? It's those prices have fallen off pretty hard. I guess I would say no. There's a lot of on the grain side, there's a lot of talk. People are trying to point to flooding and things like that, saying, "Oh, the crop's not there." And there's a case that can certainly be made for it. And I understand where they're coming from, but when we talk about the flooding, it's devastating for those that are going through it. I'm not trying to act like it doesn't, but the part of the argument that always seems to be forgotten is that, well, it's bad for those acres underwater, but how about those acres that aren't underwater? And the storyline is usually those are phenomenal. So, unfortunately, I mean, it sure seems like a lot of the growing states, the weather has been phenomenal. The crop looks like it's going to be there. And right now, I can tell you, at least the fertilizer folks I talked to, I said, listen, I am by far not a grain expert, but I know we have this hope that we're going to see prices inflate higher. I wouldn't count on it. And even if we do, I think fertilizer prices probably start to go with them.
What do you recommend for right now with the grain market?
Unfortunately, some of the better opportunities that we've had are kind of in the past. And when I say better opportunities, that is looking at purchasing the fertilizer and then selling some of that forward grain against it to kind of lock in that value. So, unfortunately, there's not going to be a one size fits all recommendation. And I say that I'm not trying to skirt the question, but I think that's going to depend on the state, the county, the city, the local country, down to the field, down to the farmer. And that's going to be dependent upon what can they do or what can't they do. Because ultimately we've got to raise every bushel we possibly can, right? But if there are ways that cuts can be made to the inputs without affecting that output, then I think that's certainly something that needs to be chased down and looked at and researched. And I'm always a very big advocate of going to our local retailer and our local agronomist and having that conversation with them. They typically give very, very good advice. But I think with where some of these prices are today, I think that anywhere any sort of savings can be made, I think this is the year we kind of look at it.
Josh, what is the river level in the Mississippi River and the Illinois River for right now with the fertile?
So obviously, a tremendous amount of moisture up north, and once again, the conversation has turned to high river levels, and it's crazy to think how violent we have seen that story shift from flooding to drought to flooding to drought. And what that has made is all of a sudden barge traffic is getting impacted. And this has been no different. There have been some locks on the upper Mississippi River that have had to shut down the traffic due to high water levels. Now, we think this is a very short term event, and there's never a great time for these events to happen from a fertilizer logistical standpoint, but this is about as perfect as it gets. And that's because we have so much time between now and November when that fall run starts up again. There's time to catch up. So we're not tremendously worried about it, but we need to keep watching because if we continue to get more rains up north and that keeps the river levels high and keeps these locks shut down, well, now we are having to get into a catch up. So that's a very short answer on that long winded response is today, not seeing a lot of impact out there because we just don't have the push to have something right now. Nobody's needing anything in the month of July. If this continues on for another month or two, different story.
Yes, we got a lot rain in Illinois River Valley. Do you see it for the future?
Based on the river level forecast that I have seen, going to the NOAA website, it seems like these high water levels are short lived. I know a lot of the forecasts that we're looking at right now, they appear like they're going to be warmer. They look like they're going to be drier. So, Illinois River, Mississippi River, Missouri, I think that all these are going to maybe they'll continue to be a little bit on the higher side, but we don't think that we're going to have to worry about flooding so much in the near term. And unfortunately, if that occurs, there's no need for any stress. There's no need for any worry in the fertilizer industry. And hopefully that means we won't see any impact to price ideas. Because obviously, these situations, if it were a longer lived situation and prices, you would see prices start to react by going higher just because of that worry that I may not be able to get resupply in place.
Would you like to go to say about the fertilizer and the river level?
Yeah, like I said, not a whole lot more really to talk about there. It's just that if you start to see a situation where the rains up north start to pick up once again, I mean, the waters are, I'm sorry, the soils are saturated. There's not really any place for it to go. So any rains that come across now, that is going to make its way to the water tables very, very quickly. But right now, fertilizer is doing quite well. It's everything is getting resupplied. Hopefully, we'll get everything in place we need for the fall season. Really, not much to be concerned with yet, but I would say it's on the upper half of our worry points today. It's a long list of worry points.
Do you have any final thoughts about these issues in the Middle East?
Yeah, obviously the Middle East is incredibly important for the global nitrogen markets. They are also a major player. Saudi Arabia is a major player in the phosphate market, and that's unfortunate because when you look at the history of the area, there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of squabbles, there's a lot of wars that go on there, and that's something we need to worry about from the fertilizer standpoint. You know, when the Houthi rebels attacked that vessel in the Red Sea that eventually sunk, well, that was a fertilizer vessel that originated from Saudi Arabia. It was a very direct link to the fertilizer industry. It's a big wake up call. My biggest worry, Caesar, is that Iran all of a sudden gets hacked off at how the rest of the world is treating it, and they start trying to block the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz. During the Gulf War, you know, the big storyline in the media was, oh, if Iraq blockades the Persian Gulf, we can't get oil tankers here. All of a sudden, they're going to lose all that oil. We're going to be in trouble. Well, that's good and well. Back then, we had a surplus of nitrogen production around the world. We could have gone without the nitrogen side, so nobody really talked about it. But today, when you look at North Africa in the Middle East region, which is a very small part of the map, that small part of the map represents about 1 out of every 2 tons of urea exported around the world. It's a massive number. And then look at Iran, and in turn, they dominate the eastern seaboard of the entire Persian Gulf. So it's so much easier for them to impact traffic if they ever chose to. And then you start discussing, you know, Iran and Israel and all these other countries around there. Tensions continue to be high, but fortunately, it seemed like we were about to jump off the cliff. Everybody backed up. Everybody seems to have calmed down. Yes, there's still tension there, and so it's still a story we very much need to watch, you know, for the nitrogen for the phosphate markets. But right now, everything has calmed down, and hopefully that continues to be the case. It would be nice to have a year of the fertilizer industry. We didn't have, you know, half a dozen black swans happening every month.
How about in Israel and China?
So with Israel, they are a major potash exporter. They don't really do much in terms of the phosphate. They don't really do much in terms of nitrogen, but they are a big potash exporter. And so we have been a little bit concerned. They are the fourth largest exporter in the world as far as the potash market goes. But like I said, it seems like steps towards peace in terms of the Gaza Strip uh, continue to be made. Hopefully, that can come to a peaceful conclusion, and that one can be put behind us, and we no longer have to worry about that. China they are the gorilla in the room when it comes to the global urea market and for the phosphate market. Like I had mentioned earlier, they historically are the world's largest producer and exporter of DAP and MAP in the world. And they also represent, typically speaking, historically speaking, about 10% of the global urea marketplace. About 5.5 million tons is what they would normally export in a given calendar year. The biggest problem we have right now is that the government is now playing a larger role than free markets are. It used to be China just export a lot of product, You could rely on them to be a supplier. Nothing big happened as far as that they get. But in the last few years, late 21, early 22, global prices spiked just like they did here in the U.S. And inventories got very tight. So the Chinese government stepped in and said, you know what? We're exporting all this product. We're going to export too much. We are going to restrict or completely blockade any exports from happening. That keeps product here at home. That keeps domestic prices low. That's a win-win for our communist people. And that worked. And I think now the government's continuing to try and bottle this lightning once again. They're continuing to step in every once in a while when they see domestic prices starting to rise, and they block the exports. And all of a sudden, they become a very volatile trade partner. They're not somebody you can count on. And like I said, when they're such a big player in the phosphate and urea marketplace, that's why you see a lot of volatility. You just never know what they're going to do. As soon as prices start to get up and things get comfortable, they come in and they start exporting a lot of product, and all of a sudden, just out of the blue, they shut down. They stop the flows. So the China, I think is going to be Israel. I think it's going to be a short-term situation. I'm hoping that comes to a conclusion relatively quickly. China, I'm afraid, is going to be a storyline we're going to have to continue to talk about for the months and years ahead. Thanks for having me on here, sir. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh. It was nice talking to you. This is Josh Linville from StoneX Financial for Fertilizer Division in Kansas City, Missouri. Stay tuned on Back Roads of Illinois. We were going to talk about the commodities markets on Back Roads of Illinois. Corn futures finished in up 3 to 4 cents. Soybean futures finished in down 7 to 8 cents. Wheat futures finished in up 8 to 10 cents. Now that we were going to talk about the livestock market for today on this afternoon. Cattle futures finished in up 4 to 6 cents. Feeder cattle finished in down 2 to 4 cents. Lean hogs finished in down 8 to 9. Texas crude oil finished in down 8 to 9 cents per barrel. Dow Jones finished in down 8 point. This is your agricultural commodity. And welcome back to Back Roads of Illinois. We were coming back with our weather in central Illinois near Peoria and the Quad Cities area. It will be held from the hurricane in Texas and in the Gulf Coast. The markets are reaction for yesterday because the weather premium for this week in the Midwest. You've been. Thanks, Ed and Kelly Nieuwhouse, Mike Zazzolo, Ed Usset, and Josh Linville. We're running out of time on Back Roads of Illinois. Thanks for listening to us. You can listen to our show on YouTube and whenever you get your podcast. For Back Roads of Illinois, I am Cesar Delgado. Have a great day.